All right, so here in the later part of winter, depending on where you live, the bass may be getting ready to group up and go up to spawn, or they may still be hanging out underneath the ice. So it's hard to tell where they are. But one of my favorite baits for wintertime fishing is just a common paddle tail swim bait. Nothing fancy. Now, we're not talking glide baits and Berkeley gillies and things like that. We're just talking just a straight up common paddle tail. And there's a couple of reasons. So they're generally not going to chase baits around too much. When they do, a lot of times they want a bigger presentation, because if they're going to expend calories, hey, they want to get a good meal out of it. So sometimes you need to upsize depending on the situation. Now, because they don't want to chase the bait fish around, your presentation needs to be pretty slow. Hence, that's why I really like a paddle tail. A paddle tail, you can move slow through the water column and just get a nice smooth action to it. And again, a glide bait or something like that may be a better option, but today we're just talking about the old paddle tail. Okay, so let's talk about rigging for a minute. Now, most of the time, you're just going to use an old ball head. And the ball head works really, really good when you're fishing in suspended waters, or if the bottom contour is fairly flat, not a lot of hang-ups, because it is an open hook design. Now, along with that, in the open hook category, you can go ahead and use a football jig if you're going to be around a lot of rock or bottom structure that's real rocky. The football jig is a great option. And probably my favorite is just a regular swim jig, because the way they've got the eyelet coming out, it's going to swim through the water real straight, and they got really good eyes on them. And I love eyes on a swim bait. A regular old swim bait head that comes in the package with a lot of these swim baits work for you just fine. Now, some other options are belly weighted. And personally, I use a lot of belly weighted because my home lake has a lot of snags in it. And you'll find to catch a lot of these fish, you need to stay near the bottom. And we got a lot of brush that just pops up out of nowhere. So I use a lot of belly weighted because you can rig them up weedless. And you've got these type of belly weights, which is an owner flashy swimmer. And I really like that. It's got a little bit more flash to it, and it's got a screw lock. And the screw lock really helps, because when you're fishing these open hooks, super glue is your best friend. I don't care what they say. You go through a lot of baits, throw a little super glue on there, unless you can get these jig heads with the screw lock on them. They're a little harder to feed on there because you got to twist the tail up and around. But to me, they're well worth it if you can get them. If not, have a little super glue, put a dab on there, hold it on for a minute. And what I do is I'll rig up 3 or 4 of them at a time. So when one starts to go bad or starts to pull loose, I'll grab another one and just rig it up and then super glue the other one back on later, because they'll bunch up on you all the time. So I know you guys aren't going to like this third option, but hey, it just works. An A-rig. An A-rig is a great option. You can swim it several different ways. You can get it near the bottom. It does hang up a lot, so I'd suggest using a braid or something like that, because you don't want to be losing A-rigs all the time. But they really just work. So you're going to need to check your local regulations, because a lot of places you can't have 5 hooks on one bait. So you'll need to put some dummy hooks or some non-hooked dummies onto some of those. Now, there's been kind of a debate on whether to go ahead and, make sure you got hooks on the bottom or the top. I'll let you decide that. But again, an A-rig, it just works. And I know a lot of you guys are totally against A-rigs, but I thought I'd go ahead and put it in the video. Okay, first of all, let's talk about some different types of paddle tails. And the most common, I think, around here anyway, is just a ribbed paddle tail swim bait. And they generally come in a 2-inch to 4-inch size in the common sizes. I know they make some that are bigger with different manufacturers. And when you talk about the common ribbed, there's several different types. The first type, and probably my favorite, is the Kitech. The only problem with Keitechs, and you can get them both in these Keitech Swing Impact Fat and just the regular Keitech Swing Impact, is they're hard to find. A lot of times I joined Keitech USA and I get on their website and I order them directly, but a lot of times they don't have what I want. And they're kind of tough to find in regular stores. I know Academies carry them and, you know, some of the big box stores. So the ones you can always find, and they're good also, but I find for me the plastic is a little softer and you got to use a little more super glue on them. You go through a few more baits, are the Strike King Rage Swimmers. But they move through the water really, really well. And I like both those products. And that's the thing about the rib paddle tail is you can go so slow and get such good movement out of them that they're just a great presentation. And I'm going to tell you, these small ones like this, they're great on an A-rig, but if you use a smaller hook, I catch crappie on them. I catch walleye a lot of times just putting these little ones on a shaky head and just dragging it real slow on the bottom. And I picked up a few bass that way too. Spotted bass. They like a shaky head on the bottom when it's real cold. I've caught quite a few spotted bass, and not in my lake, we don't have them, but in a lake down south of here. So I've had good luck also on that shaky head. Sounds weird, but it works. Now another real common one is the Googan Saucy Swimmer. And I don't happen to have any Googan products, but that's also a pretty good bait from what I've heard. Now when you get into the smooth body, those you can get in a lot bigger sizes. They go all the way from 3-inch to, I've seen some advertised at 10-inch paddle tails. That is a big paddle tail. I don't have anything nearly that big. But anyway, again, Keitech has what they call an Easy Shiner, which is a really good product. And for the smooth bodies, I like the Megabass products. The Spark Shad, that's just the old reliable, just an old Spark Shad. Works really good, comes in multiple sizes. And now Megabass has the Mag Draft. And that Mag Draft, that is really cool. It comes with its own hooks, and it's got a magnet on the inside of it, and the hooks swing up and lock into the bait, which make them fairly weedless. So those Mag Drafts, they're expensive, but they are a very nice bait. Now you got to be careful sometimes. These big bite baits aren't too bad, but when you get in these bigger paddle tails, you'll get some real stiff ones. And the stiff ones they're okay if you're going to really be burning something along. But when you're trying to move slow like you are in the winter, you know, try to stay away from those bargain basement paddle tails. You want something that's going to get you some good movement as you're moving slow. And you don't want to get too small a hook diameter. And I didn't talk about that in the hooks, but stay with a moderate wire. Don't go really light. Don't go putting a crappie jig on something because they're just going to pull out. You're fishing for a little larger fish, unless you are fishing for the crappie. But you don't want to get the really big hook either, the really, really heavy wire, because it just looks unnatural. Again, check out Owner Products. I think they got a really good line of hooks, and I really like them for all these applications. But anyway, I have no problem throwing a 3/8 ounce jig head of any kind, or, you know, belly weighted, whatever, with a bait caster. And normally what I like to run is a 7 ratio or below. And normally I go a little below. I've got some good reels that are down in the 6s. Now when I do have to go lighter, I go to my spinning reels, and I try to stay in about a 2000 series with those. You know, I try not to get real big, but that's all personal preference and what you like to throw in a spinning reel. The rods, I like to stay with a medium heavy if I can, but I use a soft tip, because most of the time what I've found is rather than trying to get a real good hook set, I go ahead, I lean into them. You know, I'll rotate my body and just go ahead and lean into those fish. And generally they're going to come up, they're going to hit it, and they're going to move sideways, and they'll hook themselves pretty good. I haven't had too much of a problem losing fish on swim baits, especially if you're using an open hook. And even those older flashy swimmers with the soft swim baits on them, they hook up pretty good. But again, don't use a real super light wire because they will pull out. And sometimes in the wintertime, you hook up with some big fish. I don't know what it is, but watch Ott Defoe's Hunt for Monster Bass, and you'll notice he's always wearing a coat, and it's in the wintertime. But they do catch a lot of big ones in the winter. All right, as far as my line size, I try not to go above 12 pound. Even if I'm fishing a big 5-inch swim bait or something like that, because you get in those bigger line sizes and you're trying to stay real deep in the water and you're trying to move slow. And those larger diameters, they're going to go ahead and they're going to try to rise on you a little bit because they're not cutting through the water as efficiently as the smaller diameter. And that's going to make the movement unnatural. It's not going to make them to where they're not swimming very level. And, you know, because you're moving real slow. I will fish an 8-pound line with a spinning rig. I really like an 8-pound line. That's kind of what I grew up as a kid. That was my go-to, was the 8-pound monofilament. And I don't know, here I am 60 years old and I still like 8-pound test. All right, so we talked a little bit about the wire diameter of the hooks, but the size of the hooks comes into play a lot because these paddle tails, you want a lot of freedom of movement because you're not moving them very fast. So I stick by the old rule of thumb. If I'm using a 5-inch swim bait, or, you know, let's limit it to 5-inch because I'm not even going to talk about 10-inch. I've never thrown one. But if you're throwing a 5-inch, I use a 5/0 hook. If I'm throwing a 4-inch, I use a 4/0 hook. If I'm throwing a 3-inch, now that's where it's a little debatable. Personally, I like a 2/0 hook, but some people will say throw it on a 3/0, but I'd use a 2/0. And anything below that, I go ahead and go down to a 1/0. And on some of the smaller ones, if all you have is a number 2, you know, jig head in the kit, throw it on a number 2. But don't put like a, you know, a 3-inch Kitech on a 5/0 hook because it's just not going to move. There's just too much hook there, and it's not going to work out real well for you. Go ahead, when you're buying your swim baits, go ahead and get the hooks to match them. So at the time of filming this video, it's February, so we're just right around the corner from some of these fish starting to move up and getting ready to spawn. So I'm getting pretty excited. So you know what? Until next time, keep calm and hook them, and watch this video next.